December 1927. When the 15th Congress of the Communist Party opened in Moscow, 10 years had passed since the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks had grown from a clique of revolutionaries into a ruling party. The delegates came to discuss what to do with the power they had consolidated over the old Romanov Empire. At the top of the party, Lenin's death had left a vacuum which at first none of his colleagues seemed eager to fill. Lenin's idea was that no one person should succeed him.
The senior ranks of the party, students of the French Revolution to a man, were obsessed by fears that a Napoleon would arise, take over the party, betray the revolution. Just such a threat appeared to come from the flamboyant leader of the Red Army, Leon Trotsky. None of them realized, however, that the real threat came from the man in control of party records, the man they called Comrade Card Index.
Comrade Card Index was the nickname for the party general secretary. His real name was Joseph Stalin. Lenin had said of him, "Comrade Stalin has unlimited authority concentrated in his hands. I am not sure he will always be capable of using it with sufficient caution." This was the man who now addressed the party as its undisputed leader. The tractor factory at Chelyabinsk in Siberia, a showpiece of Stalin's plan to modernize the Soviet Union. A plan that would transform a backward empire into an industrial giant in just 10 years. But the majority of the Soviet people knew nothing of industry. They still lived and worked on the land.
It was difficult to get the work done in those days. We didn't have any horses, just cattle, 2 bulls. Mother used to get us all going. Come on, into the fields. And off we'd all go, off to plough or to bring in the hay.
The coming of the Chelyabinsk factory changed the life of Elena Pirzhogina.
I told Dad I'm off to join the tractor factory. Where did you dream that one up, he said. Finish school like everyone else. Look, it's in all the papers. They're building an enormous factory.
In 1928, the working class, in whose name the Bolsheviks had seized power, barely existed outside a few major cities. Over the next 10 years, 17 million peasants, more than 10% of the Soviet population, moved from the land to new industrial cities like Chelyabinsk.
So we went off to find the boss of the site. He signed us up and explained, "You're going to be working on the foundations. See that mountain of earth over there? Well, the horses and carts are bringing it in, and the sand too, and you're going to wheel it round in barrows. How does that sound?" "I'll do it," I said. "I'll do everything." "Right," he said. "You live in tents for now, so get yourselves organized, and then we'll be putting you all in barracks." When we moved into the barracks, there were 100 of us in each one, people from all over the country. They were hard times, but we never noticed. We went to work singing songs.
Red Army officer Mark Makagun went to Chelyabinsk to lead the novice workers.
What can I say? It was chaos. It was misery, happiness and fear. Some were frightened of the machines. When you looked up at them, sometimes they seemed as big as a 2- or 3-story house. But we kept going, kept at it. And most important of all, we didn't lose heart.
Engineer Nikolai Bielov came from Moscow to help train the raw workforce.
They broke the machinery out of inexperience, even ran away from work. But we carried on, persisted, believed in what we were doing. And on the 31st of June 1933, the factory began production. The first tractor came off the line, and on it rode Mark Macagoon.
Everybody who'd made a part for the tractor, no matter how small, was so excited about it. Where have they put it? They ran up to have a look. Oh, that's my bit. There's my part. There was such joy, I can't tell you. There were tears of joy.
Mark Macagoon paraded the first tractor around Chelyabinsk.
As we rode along, the old peasants were crossing themselves. Lord save us. Others just fled from the noise. It was a miracle in those days, you see. A living miracle.
On the river Dnieper, thousands of workers struggled to build in record time a huge hydroelectric scheme. Stalin urged on the workers. "We have overtaken the capitalist countries politically," he said. "To achieve the final victory of socialism in our country, we also need to overtake them in the technical and economic sense. Either we do it, or we shall be crushed." Strict plans were drawn up for the way ahead.
The Soviet leadership believed that economic success was just a question of planning. The plan was a sacred text. It could not be allowed to fail. The party was convinced that Soviet man could overcome nature and create a new society. As one of their slogans proclaimed, "There are no fortresses the Bolsheviks cannot storm."
In the Urals, the foundations were laid for the world's largest metallurgical plant, Magnitogorsk. Its builders buried a tablet which read, "We, the workers and engineers of Magnitogorsk, have fulfilled Lenin's behest and have laid on the 1st of July 1930 the foundation stone of the first blast furnace." In April 1929, the party adopted the first 5-year plan for the modernization of the Soviet Empire. Living in tents, sharing beds in shifts, working long hours in appalling conditions, workers were directed to over-fulfill the already ambitious production targets set by the plan.
There was a special cinema in Leningrad. It was called the Chronicle Cinema, and there you can see everything that was happening. So you saw the Magnitogorsk, you saw how they were building. Workers were working. They showed pictures of workers working with bare feet, mixing the cement with something, and the music was playing, and they were singing, and the girls in red kerchiefs were working in the streets, cleaning up the streets with brooms. Everybody was happy and working. There was so much enthusiasm.
Western sympathizers came to marvel at the shape of things to come.
A big Russian airliner descends at Moscow, having as a passenger on board Mr. H.G. Wells. The eminent English novelist is warmly greeted by a group of distinguished Soviet writers.
To visitors like Wells, the Soviet Union seemed to offer a bright alternative to recession in the West.
I was here last in 1920, and when I was here in 1920, I talked to Lenin, and he said to me, "Come again in 10 years' time and see what we've done." Well, it's 14 years, but I've come.
Toolmaker Robert Robinson escaped the racism and unemployment of Detroit for a contract in the workers' paradise.
I never saw a people who were so imbued with the fact that they were going in 5 years' time, or at most, Stalin told them 7 years' time, to overtake and surpass the United States of America. The people were simply, in fact, they would come 6 o'clock in the morning instead of 7:30 and begin to work the machines. And when the second shift would come, they wouldn't let them work on the machine. They wanted to continue.
Two American trade unionists, Victor and Walter Reuther, came for adventure.
It was an exciting experience to see people with such minimal technical experience coming out of Central Asia or out of a Volga farm village and getting a job in a factory that is making automobiles that run, you know. This is a whole new world. It was an exciting experience for them and for us to be a part of it.
Foreign technicians like the Reuthers brought much-needed expertise to the Soviet Union. Modern ideas were also welcomed. The mass production techniques of Henry Ford were much admired. And often copied. The Gorky Auto Works was a replica of the Ford plant in Michigan, but with a few exotic additions. Every brigade of workers was expected to do its bit for progress.
I must say the tool room was a little slow in coming up with an idea, and finally someone said, well, if we could have soup spoons like they have in America that we could sterilize, that would be great. So we sent a committee to Moscow to buy some, and there weren't any soup spoons to be bought anywhere, weren't available. So they came back very disheartened, and Walter finally said, well, hell, why don't we make some, you know? We'll use some scrap fender metal, and in our free time, we'll build a die to stamp it out, which we did. And we stamped out enough for the whole tool die department cafeteria, went in there, and it was a day of celebration. They had the accordion player and the balalaika player, and they did native dances, and there were speeches made and banners painted, hailing this great cultural breakthrough. I must say, I looked forward the following day going in and eating with a metal spoon. There wasn't one spoon in the whole place. They all took them home.
The plan, with its huge projects like the Dnieper Dam, was directed by state planners in Moscow. But the great builder, Joseph Stalin, liked to put his stamp on projects in every corner of the empire.
This building is the Moskva Hotel. The architect submitted drawings to Stalin for his approval and offered him a choice of 2 facades. On the left of the plan was one design, on the right another. The plans came back with Stalin's signature across the divide between the 2 designs. No one dared go back and ask Stalin which he actually preferred, so it was built exactly according to plan.
The Moscow Metro was begun during the first 5-year plan. It was to be the most luxuriously appointed underground railway in the world, a shining example of what the workers' state could achieve. Its builders were the stars of the Soviet workforce. Their faces adorned posters. Their exploits filled the newsreels. This young woman was one of the heroines of the metro construction.
They sent me to work on access shaft number 3132. So I got